Rhodes, who is part of our Quick Hits News team. She's reporting today from Baltimore, Maryland, right outside Fort Patrick McHenry. Do I have the right name of this?
It's James McHenry, actually. I've done a little bit of research, and James McHenry was a Scots-Irish immigrant and soldier in the 1812 War, who later became part of the Constitutional Congress and ended up signing the U.S. Constitution. So this is a fort where Mike Pence is probably straying away from the Civil War Confederate Fort Bragg type, issues that sometimes pop up when it comes to forts. So he's going old school. He's going to 1812, and that's where we are today.
Well, Alex, I botched that intro to you and got the name wrong, so thank you for correcting me. The reason that we're chatting with Alex Rhodes, and by the way, she's a superstar on our Quick Hits News broadcast, and we're coming to you live via HAPS TV. The reason that we wanted to talk to Alex is because she's standing there in Baltimore, where Mike Pence is going to deliver his speech tonight at Fort McHenry. And I wonder, Alex, if you can get into a little bit of the reasoning. Why did Pence choose this particular locale for his speech today?
Sure. So where we're standing is in the Baltimore Harbor, and I don't know if you can see it, but just over my shoulder is Fort McHenry. You can actually see a American flag flying really high up there. So a bit of the reason why he would choose a place like this is because it's very important to a lot of Americana, a lot of American folklore. So the biggest thing Fort McHenry is known for is it was the fort that Francis Scott Key saw when he was on a ship in 1814. And there was a huge battle between the British and the Americans. And as dawn rose, he saw a giant American flag still at Fort McHenry, symbolizing that they were still holding down the fort. And that's why he decided to write the Star-Spangled Banner. A little bit of history about the flag. The Baltimore citizens had an idea that the British were always going to attack. And so they had a lot of time to prepare for the War of 1812. This happened in 1814, so 2 years later. And so the flag that was created was about 30 feet by 40 feet. It was an enormous flag that was created for the sole purpose of showing the British how strong the Americans were here in Fort McHenry. So it's a place that if you're a Republican who is trying to demonstrate how great America is, this is a great place to have a speech and show the strength of Americans. And I think that's probably what he's going to try and do today.
So this is going to be a speech that is very heavy on the significance, the importance of the flag, both in history and also what it means to the Trump campaign and Mike Pence today. Do you know how long ago Pence sort of came up with this idea, or that his team came up with this, and how difficult is it to, I guess, put together a live speech at a convention from this sort of backdrop?
Yeah, so it wasn't very long ago that they decided to do this Fort Bragg speech. I will say there have been a few hiccups along the way in preparation. So the Republican Party of Maryland was the one who actually decided or requested the permit from the National Park Service to be able to have this speech. And so there has been stories over the past couple of days of damages being done to Fort McHenry walkways that were created in the 1930s. And the Republican Party itself is liable for those damages. So in terms of having a live event here, it's unconventional to begin with. The National Park Service, a lot like the USPS, is a service that is nonpartisan. And so even though National Park Service employees are allowed to work during the ceremony, they're not allowed to partake in any political activities. So I'm not really sure what they'll be doing tonight. And there have been a lot of hiccups in terms of who is going to pay for things, how is the speech going to be broadcast live from such a remote place as Fort McHenry. And so it's had its journey, I would say, but then again, it's only been on the radar for a couple weeks. So in a lot like most of the RNC, I would say they've kind of pulled off a lot of things in the weeks that they've had to prepare it.
You know, that's such an interesting point, and we're talking to Alex Rhodes from Quick Hits News. She is live in Baltimore outside Fort McHenry, where Vice President Pence is going to deliver a speech tonight, and we're broadcasting live over HAPS TV. And some of the questions, in fact, Alex, that have already started coming in is one person is named, well, I can't even read the name because I don't have my glasses on. But I can see that his question is about the coverage. There's been a lot of coverage that something's just sort of normal about the Republican convention. And you've been covering politics for a few years now. And you've pointed out that, the Park Service, they're not supposed to engage in political activities. It's unheard of for an acting Secretary of State in the midst of a diplomatic mission to deliver a speech from overseas into the convention. There's a question about violations of the Hatch Act and whether there's political activity on government property. Alex, how has the reporting been on this? Has there been, in your estimation, much reporting on sort of how unusual it is, or have we all just become so immune to the Trump campaign doing things differently?
I think there's been a mix of reporting, right? So a lot of people kind of talk about the Hatch Act frequently when it comes to the Trump administration. You know, Kellyanne Conway, I think, has like 5 or 6 violations of the Hatch Act, and a lot of other staffers do. So I think it's been an issue that's kind of carried through the entire Trump presidency. So for it to come up again at the RNC is not exactly abnormal for this administration. So in that way, I think people are kind of downplaying it. But I think yesterday, especially when we saw the naturalization and the pardoning ceremonies in different parts of the White House, and then the Rose Garden being put on display, and then now we're going to have the National Park Service put into this equation as well. They are really using a lot of federal resources to highlight all of the power that they have, really. So I think there has been some reporting, but I think there are also the Hatch Act itself is kind of not a really strong act. It's not something that you can kind of penalize people for in a really straightforward way. And so people like Mark Meadows have come out and said, you know, what voter is going to care about a Hatch Act violation over seeing Mike Pence at a gorgeous fort in the middle of Baltimore? So I think that's the equation that the Republicans have kind of come up with.
Well, that takes me to my next question, because never mind, you know, people who say this is illegal and it's a violation of the law. I guess there's the sort of the politics of it. And how would you evaluate the political equation, taking what the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, says in terms of you know, being able to bathe Melania Trump in sort of the grand imagery of the Rose Garden, or Mike Pompeo on a diplomatic mission overseas, or there's Mike Pence today at Fort McHenry. Do you see a political upside, as at least Mark Meadows and other Republicans do?
I think so. I think, like I said, it kind of shows the power that they have internationally and nationally. So if you want to show just how well Trump wields those powers and just how much he can do, then I think that this is like a really good way of showing that. And I think for people who are maybe on the fence about voting for him, or people who are, I guess, a little disillusioned with everything going on with coronavirus, this was a great way to say, like, you know, coronavirus might not be where we're doing our best, but look at Israel and look at, you know, Mike Pence speaking here and other things. So it helps distract from larger issues that the Republicans might not have the best answers on, I would say.
We're talking to Alex Rhodes from Quick Hits News. She's one of our stars on the program. She both edits and reports and does all sorts of great stuff for us. And we're talking to her live over HAPS TV. She is live in Baltimore at Fort McHenry, where Vice President Pence is going to be delivering his speech later today. Alex, I want to ask you, because, you know, you're something of a political guru, what you make of the convention so far. I mean, it started with this sort of heavy focus the first night on COVID-19, with the Republicans trying to say, here are all the great things that President Trump has done in terms of getting supplies. And they ran clips of Democratic governors praising Donald Trump. And then last night, there was no mention of COVID whatsoever, and it was simply the family talking about him. What do you make about how the convention's going for them?
I think if you were to speak to someone in the Trump world, they would say it's been a really big success. I think a lot of people have noted how few weeks they had to kind of prepare something that the Democrats had months to prepare. And so changing it to virtual kind of set a really high bar for the Trump administration to not kind of flop with this RNC. And so I think all of their videos have been really well produced. I think the segments, for the most part, have been really well produced. It is interesting to note that a lot of yesterday and the day before speeches were pre-taped, even though Trump explicitly said that he did not want them to be pre-taped. He wanted most things to be live. And I think, honestly, the pre-tapes have gone in the favor of the Republicans. It's really shown a polished RNC and a polished Trump administration. And so I look at Twitter, and I've seen both mentions and stuff. And I think for Republicans, and I think for on-the-fence voters, this will strike a chord. All of the things that they've been doing, it's kind of it's a pick your poison kind of thing. So if you are a person who didn't want to vote for Trump because of maybe race relations, you had the pardoning and the naturalization yesterday. If you're a very pro-life person, you had Nick Sandmann and Abby Johnson yesterday with probably the most pro-life circumstance I've ever seen in a political event of this stature. So I think it's gone pretty well so far for them, and I think that tonight is going to be a lot of the same.
We're talking to Alex Rhodes. She's with Quick Hits News, and we're broadcasting to her with her live from Baltimore, Maryland, where she is in front of Fort McHenry, where Vice President Pence is going to be speaking. If you want to ask some questions of her or me, you can get on Twitter and join the conversation. Alex, I have a question for you. In that we were in our Quick Hits show, which is coming out later today at 5 o'clock. We spent a lot of time talking about what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin last night. Two people were shot and killed by essentially armed civilians who were trying to defend property. There was apparently some sort of clash between activists and the people who had the weapons. The police could not get in between them. Two people shot. A third person shot, was not killed. How does these sort of images of sort of civil unrest, do you have a sense in terms of what that does regarding Wisconsin politics? Wisconsin being a battleground state, does it move Wisconsin one way or the other in your estimation?
Yeah, I do think this kind of helps the Republican messaging of looting is bad and kind of tying that to the Democratic message, right? And so I saw yesterday that a lot of Wisconsin footage from Kenosha is not just going to be played in Wisconsin for the Republicans, it's also going to be played in Pennsylvania, it's going to be played in Michigan, it's going to be played in suburbs around the country that Trump is really trying to sway to show them, you know, the message that in the first night the McCloskeys had where, you know, people are going to come into your affluent suburbs and start looting, and, you know, chaos is going to ensue. So I think it does sway in turn to the Republicans, and I think the Democrats don't have a very specific message on this issue that can sway people back.
Alex Rhodes. Alex, it is great chatting with you. There are some we're apparently having a few audio issues, apparently because of a technical issue on my end. So we're going to wrap this and try to talk to Alex Rhodes perhaps again later this afternoon or this evening. But Alex, well, I think the audio is fine on your end, so I'm just going to ask you one more question. Give me a sense about what you're looking for tonight from Mike Pence in Baltimore.
Right. So speaking of Kenosha, it has already been reported that he will be speaking about that. Mike Pence is staunchly Blue Lives Matter. He's done multiple Blue Lives Matter rallies across the country. And so I think we're going to look for him to reinforce that very Blue Lives Matter, you know, Trump is the law and order president type message. So that's going to be a large tenet. I think he's also, Mike Pence has had 4 years of kind of towing this really fine line of making sure that he looks okay in the eyes of the, you know, American population, but also pandering to Trump. And so he's going to be very much a person who tries to personalize Trump. He almost never goes against him in terms of policies and stuff. So it will be very in line with the rest of the family that we've seen so far in terms of a law and order president. We're pro-choice. We don't believe in looting. The economy is great. So I think those are kind of the things that we're hoping to see, or we will see from him. One interesting thing is he was head of the coronavirus task force for the White House. So the issue of coronavirus coming up, it'll be interesting to see if he brings it up at all, if he brings it up in the past tense, like a lot of people did yesterday, or if he brings it up in the present tense and tries to address it like Melania Trump did as she was the last person to speak at the RNC. So he's had to deal with a lot of the governors who have had lots of problems in their states with coronavirus, and there have been a lot of cases where he's told them something and then Donald Trump has come back and completely negated whatever promises he's made. So Mike Pence will have to kind of deal with that, and he'll have to talk about coronavirus in that type of way where he can, you know, make sure the president is happy, but also the Republican governors that he serves are satisfied as well.
Alex Rhodes, some terrific reporting for us on Quick Hits News live via HAPS TV. Alex, thanks so much for doing this. Appreciate you being in Baltimore and giving us the sights and sounds and preview of the Pence speech. Terrific work, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks to everybody watching us up and down. We'll be back with Quick Hits News publishing today at 5 o'clock and more HAPS Live tonight at 9 o'clock during the Republican convention. I'm